there's one legend that says that Miriam overheard Zipporah saying, "My husband has given me up for God." That he spends basically all the day at the office and all the night at the office. And she was feeling rejected. So we get a glimpse of the relationship there. Now, the problem is that Miriam, according to some, she wasn't lying. She was saying to her brother, guess what? I heard our brother's wife really, is not happy in the marriage, and God strikes her with leprosy. What do we learn from that? What about gossip in particular here? What happens between, staying on this topic, because listen, we all have friends who don't have good marriages, right? And every once in a while, you'll be sitting with your wife or your husband and you'll say, or your friend, I hear that this or that. What happens between a husband and wife, according to the Torah, isn't anybody's business but the husband and the wife. Yes, according to everything that we can look at in the Midrash and in the Torah, they didn't have a great marriage. But that's to be dealt with between the two of them, and not thrown around the community for people to gossip about. But you look at this story, and you realize that the Torah is desperately trying to teach those people who become spouses, those people who become parents, that you have a responsibility first to your children. You can't forget that your son needs to be circumcised on the 8th day. Let's make it a little bit more real life. You can't forget the soccer game that's really important for your 6-year-old. You can't forget that your 9-year-old has a really big test that she is nervous about, and she's expecting you to come home and review it with her. Or your 7-year-old who's been waiting because you promised to be home at 8 o'clock to read him a bedtime story, but you got caught up in conference calls and meetings and various different things like that. I'm guilty of all of these things myself, and I see some of you are too. And I want to go back to Yitro's wisdom, when he said, you can't do it alone. I have colleagues who do exactly what I do in another religion, and they're celibate. They're not married. And there are days that I get, there are days that I understand, no wonder they don't have a wife and kids. Because it's a huge responsibility. And some of you have professions, you can say exactly the same thing. It's not just rabbis and cantors. There's so many of you who can identify with that. But the fact is Judaism doesn't want rabbis or cantors or really anybody to be celibate. They want us to have spouses and children and live a life. Because we can't do it alone. The work shouldn't be first. Our families should be first. And as somebody who is guilty of many of these things, and I know I share that guilt with lots of us, I just hope that maybe over the next, now 23 hours, we can find a little bit of time, even if it's an extra 15 minutes that you normally wouldn't spend, to give back to what our tradition teaches us needs to be so important, and realize the joy of just not having to do it alone. I welcome any thoughts or ideas